Hi, I'm Jim.
Hi, I'm Lissa.
And this is The Bottom Line. Okay, we're rolling anytime.
Okay, hi, welcome to The Bottom Line. Thank you for joining us today. We have got a very special guest today.
Yay.
We have got Faye Seidler. Seidler
Yep, Seidler is correct.
is an award-winning suicide prevention advocate that specializes in LGBTQ plus populations. She's a born and raised North Dakotan, has a decade of experience in community organizing, public speaking, and professional development training. You are also known for connecting and uplifting others, bringing communities together, and always keeping hope and focus. Welcome, Faye Seidler. Thanks for joining our show today. How are you doing?
Oh, well, thank you for having me. Thanks for the introduction, and I'm doing pretty good today.
Wonderful, wonderful. Now, September is designated as Suicide Prevention Awareness Month. Is that correct?
Yep, that's correct.
And that's kind of why we wanted to have you on this month to talk about suicide in North Dakota primarily. Now, our show is an internet show, so we know that it goes out to other states in the country. So for anyone who's not in North Dakota, you can find your own statistics online. I'm very positive.
Yeah.
The information we're going to be sharing today is very general information. We're going to be talking about the frequently asked questions that people ask about suicide. And basically our goal is to help people become more aware of the warning signals of suicide, how to talk about suicide, especially to the young people in our country, and just to be aware of what's going on when it comes to suicide. Let's see, how do we want to start? What are some of the popular myths about suicide? I know people have really weird ideas about it, don't they?
Yeah, so with, and I guess to kind of clarify before we get too far into this, a lot of my work is as a suicide prevention advocate. So I'm not really coming at this from maybe like a therapist lens or like a first responder, like someone who maybe would answer a suicide call. So a lot of our work in is kind of more of that data side or sometimes that policy side.
Right.
But that said, as I kind of get into this, I think there's so many things that go together with the difficulty in talking about suicide and the myths and misinformation around it. And the first, the big one that we think about is that no one wants to start that conversation about suicide. If they feel like a family member might be at risk or is acting differently, they kind of are afraid to mention it or to talk about it, because I think if they do, that kind of manifests it into reality. And it's
it seems to be quite taboo.
Yeah, the idea that talking about it just makes the whole thing worse.
Yeah. Or gives ideas.
Yeah.
And I don't know about the rest of the country, but in the Midwest here, we are extremely stigmatized in terms of not talking about mental health. Culturally, we try to be, strong. We try to take care of our own problems. Or
we're
feel
stoic,
Stoic, yeah.
Yep, we don't want to be like a burden to others, or even we kind of feel impolite to really press people if they feel like they're having a bad time. But the fact is that a lot of people who are struggling with suicidality, you're not going to put that idea into their head when you talk about it. That's not people get into that state regardless.
Right.
And then a lot of people who are struggling, they honestly want to talk about it with someone, but they don't know how to have that conversation. Mm-hmm. So they just kind of try to avoid it, or they sometimes have different behaviors that they are ways they're trying to communicate they're struggling. Right. But a lot of them are alone and sometimes scared, and they want someone to ask them about how they're doing so they can finally have that conversation.
Yeah, they don't know how to start the conversation themselves. Yeah, and they're afraid that if they do, somebody's going to call the cops on them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or going to throw them in the psych ward.
Yeah, put them in the straitjacket and
And I think that's something that's really good to bring up too, because we have the suicide prevention hotline number, which is now 988.
Yes.
And it's a really short number, easy for folks to know about, so you can give them a call. And one of the biggest fears people have that stops them from calling is the fear that they're going to be put into inpatient, where their agency is going to be taken away, and they have all these fears of what could happen. And I don't know what the statistics are for everywhere else, but in North Dakota, 95% of calls that go to First Link, which answers our 988 number, are resolved without any kind of welfare check, where police might come or ambulances.
Wonderful.
And the ones that are almost overwhelmingly because the person asked for it.
Right.
So To be honest, there is a risk with it, but it's extremely small. It accounts for something like 1% or less of cases, and they don't want to do that. They don't want to make those calls if someone's uncomfortable with it. So they really try to talk to people who call and, figure out how to make them feel safe or what resources to go to. So their priority when you call a suicide hotline is not to get like cops to show up at your house. That is basically the extreme last case thing that they really want to do.
Right. It's to actually have that conversation with them, allow them to open up and talk about their feelings. And talk about what they're planning. Now, 988, that's a text number too, or do I have that wrong?
Yeah, you can call it and you can text it. And I know you can also do things like text home, like HOME, to 741-741.
Oh, cool.
And there's a few different ways to access like suicide prevention lines or helplines that you can. Typically, calling 988 is the easiest access, but I'm pretty sure you can text them too. I'm just worried that maybe you have to like text a zip code, and I'm not sure exactly how that plays out. But it's pretty easy to like Google and find that information too.
Yeah, on the Facebook, we have a Facebook page, and on the Facebook page, what I did, folks out there, is I grabbed an article from NAMI, the National Association for the Mentally Ill. And basically, I shared that with Faye so that she would understand what I kind of was hoping for our talking points today. And I put that on the Facebook page. It has all kinds of information on how to use 988, on how to help people if you think someone might be contemplating or thinking about suicide, how to help them.
Yeah.
It's on the Facebook page right now, and you can go join us on there if you want to. I'm sorry.
Now, what's that number again?
988.
988.
988.
Okay.
And then there's a texting one where you can text home to 741-741.
Got you.
Okay. Now, you have the statistics, I understand, about the community that you talk the most about, which is the LGBTQ community plus, right?
Yep, that's correct.
Okay.
So within my suicide prevention work, I focus largely on LG plus populations. And within North Dakota, I'm the data expert on how our queer populations are doing and how our kiddos in particular are doing.
See, we get experts on the show.
Yep.
Yeah, we're good by that. Go ahead.
So do you want me to kind of run down with how our youth are doing?
Please.
Yes.
Especially with the recent House bills that were passed in North Dakota that pretty much is putting our LGBTQ plus youth in a really bad way. Yeah.
For sure. And I guess there is one thing I want to kind of preface before I get into that. And sometimes people get into the mistake of thinking suicidality is from one cause. And that might be because maybe your parents are struggling with addiction problems, or maybe you are. It could be because you're dealing with being homeless or lost a job or a bad breakup. And typically with suicide, it is multifaceted. There's usually never just one cause from it. So even when we're talking about queer populations, it's not necessarily, we see a discrepancy I'll get into in a second, but it's not necessarily because they are queer or LGBTQ plus or transgender. It's because maybe their family rejected them, and that's what would have been one protective factor that's not there.
Yes.
Or they're experiencing bullying at school, and that's another protective factor that's not in their life. For North Dakota in particular, our suicidality for our youth is pretty high. And the way that we look at it is in three different broad questions that we ask within our youth risk behavior survey. And this is a CDC surveillance system that states can opt into. I think over 30 states are opted into it. I know not all of them. I don't know the exact number offhand though. And what it does is it asks 100 questions of our youth going through middle school and high school. And these questions are related to health outcomes. So they can be about bullying. They can be about if they're getting fitness and exercise, mental health, substance use, just a lot of questions like that. And the three questions we ask around suicidality are, have you ever seriously considered killing yourself?
Yeah.
And that's one of the questions, and we typically refer to that as suicidal ideation.
Right.
One thing to keep in mind with this question about suicidal ideation, and especially when people are kind of first talking about this, is a lot of people struggle with this at some point in their life. The idea that maybe they don't want to be here, and sometimes it's more casual, sometimes it's more serious. But it's not that scary if someone has suicidal ideation. It is a risk factor, but don't be super alarmed if someone is feeling these things. It's something you can still talk to them and then, direct them to help with.
Right.
The next level of that is called making a plan. Well, it's making a plan is the next question to ask. Are you seriously considering making a plan for taking your life? And that's when you get to that next level, which is kind of scarier because then there's active thinking about it.
Right.
So that's the next question that we ask. And then the final question we ask is, have you ever tried to take your own life? So those are the 3 questions we ask for middle school and high school students. And it actually switches a little bit. Sometimes you ask ever in your life, and sometimes you ask in the last 12 months, and that obviously changes maybe how they answer it. And what I can say, and not with having like the report in front of me and everything like that, is that we have seen suicidality increase in North Dakota, and I think it's probably been across the nation for all of our populations, especially our youth.
Yeah.
And for North Dakota, for all youth, the suicidality is about 20%. So having seriously considered suicide. So quite a lot of our kids, 1 in 5, are struggling with this in some way.
Wow.
And yeah, it's a bit to take in.
Yeah, it is.
I guess the question is, how do you know when it's time to take it seriously enough to get treatment and get assistance?
Yeah.
And I will say, as we continue this conversation, if it is upsetting, not to like throw the viewers or listeners you have to not listen anymore.
No, it's not.
But it can get heavy. So I mean, taking breaks with this, or even if you like get really intense emotions, like even finding help is completely appropriate because this topic is heavy, right?
Yeah. Well, we usually do heavy topics though. That's
okay.
That's
so
very,
they're used to
that's
this kind of stuff.
completely yeah. In fact, that's what they tune in for. Is we talk about mental illness, we talk about anxiety, we talk about toxic parents. Yeah, we do really heavy stuff. Well, please go ahead.
Yeah. So the way to really think about suicidality is we often think about it in different kind of risk factors.
Right.
So if someone isn't expressing any kind of suicidality, then their risk is probably pretty low. And maybe they have other like depression or anxiety where maybe suicidality becomes a risk in the future, but it's not there. And for a lot of folks, early intervention is really what you want to do. So typically, when you're originally looking at risk factors for someone's mental health, you're looking at kind of some of those things you think would be obvious, and that is maybe a kid stops talking as much as they used to, they stop engaging in activities they liked, they start acting out, they start experimenting with like different kind of substances, like all those tend to be risk factors that something's going on either with their mental health or physical health, or they're trying to cope with some way.
Right.
And those are the same risk factors we might look at for suicidality. And then ideally, if we catch those, we can talk to the kiddo and maybe have some tough conversations, because kids don't always want to talk to us, right?
Right, that's true, yeah.
About what's going on, and then maybe that can be at least letting them know that you're there to help them, or that you can maybe get them to see therapy, or just kind of figure out some ways to make sure that they know that you care about them and their mental health matters.
Yeah, the thing is, the symptoms, as you describe them, sound a lot to me like the symptoms of something called adolescence.
Yeah.
Again,
being a teenager.
Again, it's knowing where to draw the line.
But I think what you're saying, Faye, and what you're saying is really good, is that if your kids at any time, if their behavior suddenly changes, you really need to check in with them,
right,
and find out what's going on and talk to them very honestly about what's going on to keep the lines of communication open.
And I will say, and I am myself a survivor of suicide. So when I come at the next part of this conversation, I just want to say it's from kind of more of a peer support lens and not a clinical lens.
Okay.
Just to be clear on that end of it.
I like that lens.
I think what's important is that sometimes parents especially, they come into these conversations with, this needs to go away.
Yeah.
My kid needs to be mentally healthy, and I need to fix this.
Right. You need to stop doing whatever you're doing right now, because you're embarrassing the family.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So that can sometimes be the lens these conversations happen, which tend to push kiddos away.
Yes.
And the best way to have them isn't necessarily that solution focus, like, okay, how do we make you happy tomorrow? Because you're right, when you grow up, there's a lot of feelings you have growing up, and there's a lot of big emotions and big events where you can feel more disconnected and all that.
Thank you.
What really matters, though, is that you're not there to, like, you need to be happy tomorrow, or you're not there to just, I'm going to fix this problem that's happening right now. You're there to say, hey, when you're ready, I'm here to help you.
Right.
And if this gets so intense that you're starting to feel things like hurting yourself, please talk to me so we can get you in with these resources. And if you don't want to talk to me, you can call 988, and that can be someone that you talk to. Yep. So it's about giving them opportunities and letting them know that there is help when they're ready to accept it.
And that you love them either way, that you love them no matter what, and you just want them to feel better about themselves and about what's happening to them. Yeah.
Got you.
Very good.
And in terms of like, when do you know it's going to be like, if you want to use a metaphor, like kind of drowning as you're swimming, when do you know that they're actually like needing help, and when are they just kind of struggling to swim in the water?
Right.
The problem is you kind of never do know exactly. Damn. And that's why earlier when we talked about just, hey, would talking about suicide make someone suicidal? No. So it's also important to have direct conversations with someone and ask them just directly, are you depressed? Right. Are you anxious? Do you feel suicidal? Right. Do you feel like you have those thoughts? Because you can't assume. Yeah. And when you talk about them and give them the opportunity to open up about it, they're more likely to tell you. And you know, you're more likely to learn about that as opposed to not having those conversations.
Yeah. Do you like yourself? Do you like your life? Yeah. Because those are good at telling people. If you don't like yourself, you know, then we're talking about, you know, severe self-esteem and vulnerability issues. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay. So we know about, so basically having open and honest conversations. If our children, if our young people show any of the behaviors such as changes in their behavior.
Yeah.
Uh-huh. Just to reiterate. What was it? Oh, the other thing I wanted to talk about that I really appreciated about you. Now, you have a show called Sundays with Faye.
Yep.
On Facebook. Tell us what you talk about on that show, pretty please. I'd love to hear about it.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think one important thing to keep in mind, and I do suicide prevention advocacy, but like I said earlier, suicide prevention or suicide itself is something that is several systems failing. Yeah. And that could be a home support, that could be school support, that could be you not have access to therapy or housing or job security. Like, it's everything. Yeah. So it's really important for everyone to consider themselves part of suicide prevention.
Ooh, that's
because
a good
every point of support that we give, whether it's talking about it on the show and just kind of starting to demystify these conversations and the stigma around it, whether it's we're a teacher and helping kids out, whether it's we're just, you know, trying to give someone a good day when we're going to get coffee, that's all things that can lead into suicide prevention.
Right.
So for the show I host, it's North Dakota based, so like the community resources that happen in North Dakota. And what I typically talk about is North Dakota stories that focus around different kind of community events or different kind of cool things that are happening for like marginalized communities or more minoritized communities, large focus on LG plus opportunities, but also like when our government spends a bunch of money on child healthcare access, that's an important thing to talk about. Everything I talk about on the show is in some way trying to improve resiliency and hope in communities. It's saying that when we kind of get depressed or suicidal, we also get isolated and we kind of feel like there's nothing going on or there's no forward movement on stuff. And I really try to remind people that there are so many opportunities to connect with community, to connect with other people, to get involved, to volunteer, to, with as many bad things as we tend to focus on in the news, there are so many good things out there too.
Yeah, there really are. Now, you also, we can subscribe to your emails, right?
Yep, I have an email service that kind of covers the same thing. Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, so I have an email service that I send out, which kind of covers the same thing. We're looking at community events that are happening, and maybe it's like a cool movie that's occurring that's being hosted. Maybe it's a opportunity for like a communal eating opportunity for like free food for folks to show up and just eat and talk to each other.
Nice.
It's also training opportunities for folks who work in healthcare so they can be better equipped with suicidality resources. And sometimes kind of a check-in with some of the work I do in the suicide prevention sector, which could be like one of the big things I really try to do is something related to secondary trauma. And that's basically all the folks that work in suicide prevention or as first responders. Those are really tough jobs, and we don't always have good resources and support for them.
Yeah. They walk into some of the most horrific situations. And they're left with those memories. They're left with those memories, and it's something you can't unsee.
Yeah.
But yeah, everything's basically about creating opportunities and landing spots for hope in some capacity.
Oh, I love that. That's wonderful. Yeah, what was it? I started subscribing, getting the Prairie Action emails, and I think what it was they had quotes from you in the emails, and I became interested in what you did, and so then I hooked up with you that way. And I'm really impressed with all the really good work that you're doing around North Dakota and how you're helping this very vulnerable community that we have in North Dakota. For people who don't know North Dakota, basically, I'm just going to say this right out. Most of North Dakota is very anti-gay. They anti-trans, they stoic, very conservative beliefs and views. And so it's
very much a paternalistic outlook on things.
Yeah, and so it's really hard. It's harder than if you lived in San Francisco or or New York, to live out here as a gay person or as a trans person. And as you probably know, the red states have been passing anti-trans healthcare bills, and basically taking away very necessary gender-affirming healthcare from their trans children, from their trans kids, in many states right now. And it's a really frightening prospect for people in our community, in our LGBTQ plus community out here. That basically the conservatives are kind of standing up and attacking, these young people. They're by and large youths, young people who are just trying to be who they are. And it's really awful. What was it I wanted to say to you? Oh, you took a mental health class, didn't you, recently?
Yeah, so I actually just attended and, graduated. I got a certificate from Mental Health First Aiders.
Nice. What was that like?
Sure, and one really cool thing is it is currently, for at least North Dakota residents, it is currently open for anyone to take. And the Mental Health First Aider class is a really cool class in teaching you how to have conversations, like if someone is feeling suicidal, if someone has problems with substance abuse, if they are, getting into a point where their mental health is impacting their life, Mental Health First Aid teaches you how do you intervene in that situation to provide help for someone. So currently there are free classes in North Dakota people can still sign up for right now up until January, I think is when I saw the last one. And it's not for you don't have to be a mental health specialist. You don't have to work in the human sector or as a social worker. It's actually designed so if you are maybe just a really big community person, maybe in a bigger church, if you are just someone who wants to learn more about this for your friends, or even if you are a licensed professional, it's kind of appropriate for anyone. And I will say that I have a high level of expertise on suicidality and having those conversations. But when I took it, one of the things you really learn as a Midwesterner is just how much stigma there is about even imposing a question on someone.
Yeah.
And you would think it would be the same. I know for sure that if I think someone is suicidal, I should ask them, hey, what's going on? Are you feeling suicidal? Can I get you help? I knew that. But for some reason, I felt like if it was their mental health seemed not great, I'd be like, oh, well, they'll talk to me if they want to. I couldn't make that connection, even though it seems like the same exact thing. Because
you were going to be rude to interrupt them.
Yeah.
I don't want to be rude. I don't want to interrupt you while you contemplate suicide. Yeah. No, I don't want to bother you. Yeah.
Right.
I don't want to bother you here. Yeah, exactly. I know. It's the North Dakota nice. I know.
It's so wild because I was so well trained in one aspect of it, and I somehow just didn't understand how it would be the same for everything else. So it's really good for Midwesterners in particular to take. And it basically just says, ignore all of those things that we were raised with and just ask people what's going on. And
exactly.
the model they teach you kind of there's a 2-hour prep for the one I took and then 6 hours of actual like talking about it in training is
nice.
They have, it's called LG.
It's called what?
And all those, it's not a smooth word. It's called LG.
LG,
and
okay.
It's 5 letters that break down into things they're supposed to do.
Okay.
The first one is basically ask, assess, and that's have a conversation, see if someone's at risk for something.
Yeah.
And they teach you different risk factors to look for, and kind of what I went over briefly.
Right.
You'll leave with knowing what to ask and assess and look for, so you know if they are someone who maybe needs further help or they're just having a bad day, and that we all have those.
Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And
the other
it's
one
nice,
is give.
It's nice to talk about if you have a bad day too.
What's that?
I'm sorry. I said it's nice to talk to somebody if you have a bad day too. Go ahead.
Oh,
I'm sorry.
Yeah. The other one is give, and that is basically when you're talking to them, be able to give them different resources or help or suggestions. So follow the conversation. Like, don't just jump in and like throw a resource packet at them. But like as you talk to them, part of being a mental health first aider is knowing there's resources everywhere, and there are resources for everyone too. So a lot of people think cost is a factor, but there tends to be sliding fee scale or opportunities or programs that people can get help. So that's what give does, is here are the resources that exist. The L is for listen non-judgmentally, and that's another tough one for the Midwest. People are going to talk about problems, and it might be with substance use, it might be with mental health, it could be things that we might have some internal stigma or prejudice around, but it is really trying to, in that moment, really make it about the other person, about listening to them and making sure they feel safe. We can't always hide our own values that we grew up with, right? Like there are people that, whatever they might say, you might like, oh, really? Like that might be your emotional reaction that you can't like help, but it's really just doing your best to be present and listen to them.
Right, yeah.
And then the final 2 E's are basically encourage self-help and encourage professional help. And the ways to think of that is encourage professional help is basically, a lot of people think therapy can't help them. That's part of our stigma around mental health, but it's also because people typically aren't educated on what therapy can do.
Right,
and
that's true.
The way to understand therapy for listeners right now is don't think about it as you go in there and get fixed, because that's what a lot of people think. It's like you go in there and you fix your depression, you fix your anxiety. It's really a lot more like going to a nutrition coach or like a physical coach. You're learning how to assess your own mental health. You're learning about tools to make sure that you feel comfortable and can stay regulated. It's really about thinking about mental health in the same way we think about physical health. You just have to understand it, train it, and be good about it. So letting them know that. And then for the self-help part, it's basically reminding them that they matter. And no matter what's going on in their life, they should give themselves some grace and care. Like, you deserve to care about yourself, basically.
Yeah, that is beautiful. Faye, how can people get a hold of you?
So I'm very easy to get a hold of by email.
Really
my email is pretty much everywhere. But it's just my first name and last name at gmail.com.
And then don't forget there is Sundays with Faye on Facebook, right?
Yeah.
What time?
So I do it at 8:30s. I'm still kind of finding my voice with it, but I'll be doing it every week, and I hopefully will get better at it.
I'm gonna. This is also on the Facebook page right now, along with I grabbed your mental health schedule for the trainings. And
fantastic.
That is also on the Facebook page right now if you're interested in taking any of those courses. We unfortunately are running out of time. Faye, we really appreciate you coming to us today and helping us answer these really important questions.
We are grateful.
About
Very
suicide.
grateful.
We're so grateful, and it was so nice to visit with you. Do you have any kind of last thoughts to leave us with today?
Yeah, absolutely. So as much as we talk about the struggles that exist, and if you look into the high suicidality or trauma that occurs, it can be tough to sit with. I want to assure people listening right now that I am the data expert. I know how bad it is, but I really want you to know there is a ton of hope too. I work with people all across North Dakota, and we're a rural state, we're a small state, we don't have a lot of resources, but I can find you an amazing person in pretty much every city who's really trying to make sure people feel included and people feel safe from whatever background they might be. There are heroes everywhere, and there are people who care everywhere. So when you start to feel hopeless and like the world's too big and scary, know that there's people like me and there's people all around that want to help and care. And I have a lot of hope in the future.
Oh, thank you so much, Faye. Hang on for a second, Faye. Hey, folks, thank you for joining us today. We are going to come to you next time with a brand new topic. Thanks for joining us. Bye-bye.